So today, because it's Red Dot August, I thought that isn't it wonderful that Zining gets to share a bit about the flower that is Singapore's national motif, the Vanda Miss Joaquim. But she's going to talk a bit more about what this flower embodies. Behind it, there's a lot of stories about hidden women. She'll tell you a bit more about that. And she's going to do that by reading. Actually, right, the wonderful thing is, the sound here is beautiful. Thanks to the technical team from Esplanade. Thank you very much. So later, if you want, you can even close your eyes and listen to her voice, because she's going to voice out 3 characters. And I think sometimes in our busy day, we don't actually take time to listen. So now that you're here, give yourself a chance to help time to slow down, listen to her voice, and let her take you through in the language of orchids, right? So warm round of applause for Zining, please. Yeah. I'll be introducing her in a Q&A later, so let her continue first.
For the intro, Kage. Welcome everyone, thanks for being here. Very excited to be reading here tonight. But before that, thanks so much to the Esplanade team and the sound team for kind of being here and supporting as well. Also thank you to the Singlit station for helping the program, and also my publisher Ethos Books. So today, on the occasion of Red Dot August, I'm going to be reading from the Orchid Folios, which weaves together 3 stories, as Kage said, that center our national flower, the Vanda Miss Joaquim. So there's the story of Agnes Joaquim, the woman who hybridized the orchid, and the story of how this Vanda Miss Joaquim became our national flower, what it means for our identity as Singaporeans. There is the fictional story of a florist who has a very personal relationship to this orchid. And in this book, she's kind of grieving the passing of her mother. And the third story are kind of like reflections of a poet on what it means to create a narrative, and what it means for something to be a motif, and what it means to kind of anchor our identity on a symbol. So today, as you listen, I hope that you listen out for the 3 different voices that I've created for these characters. Before I begin, though, I do want to say one more thing. So this book is about many, many things. It's about our relationship with nature. It's about our identities, how it's shaped, how our narratives are written. It's about language. But this morning, I was also reminded about how this book is very much about women, and the women at work, whose work is not always seen, the women in history whose work is sometimes ignored or just sometimes even forgotten themselves. Also the ordinary women in our everyday lives, who have nurtured us. So today I heard that my grandaunt had died, and I was just, brought back to the space of my childhood, and being in the space where she and my grandmother were playing cards and gossiping and bickering, and otherwise just being in that space of love. So today's reading is very much dedicated to her memory. I was about to leave. Then I tripped, knocked over the books I'd stacked to make a stand for my phalaenopsis. The pot shattered. The roots were bare, coiled tightly around bark. It's overdue for reporting. I was surprised I felt nothing else. It's an old orchid, one I gave Mum almost a decade ago, before the store opened. My oldest orchid. It flowers still. One of the books on that stack, a dictionary, had fallen open. On the right was a morning glory, its indigo now sepia. On the left, a brown stain. I bent to pick up the dictionary, sent a flurry of flowers and leaves flitting to the floor. Mum used to bring me to the neighborhood park. The swings at the playground made small, silver squeaks. On the way home, we would study the ground for blooms to press between pages. We had a vast collection, which I had forgotten for years, until now, when I find myself sitting on cold towel, sobbing amidst the foliage of a past life. Floristry basics, cuttings. A word is a cutting, a sentence, a bouquet. When the inflorescence wilts, scatter cuttings in a tub of water. Allow words to float as they absorb the new context into which they have been plunged. When I got up to repot my orchid, the sky was indigo. I unclipped the stakes holding up the stem. I dug into the roots. Mum taught me everything I know about orchids. Inside everything, the orchid, my hands, the freckled leaves of old books laid bare, was steeped in blue. I surfaced for breath, opening the door to warm air. Cars drove in low hums. Orchid, noun, 1. Orchid grew out of the Greek orchis, for tubers of orchids resemble testicles. Orchis, hybrid son of a nymph and satyr, raped a priestess at a festival held for Dionysus. The fates sent wild beasts to tear his body apart. Orchis's father mourned and prayed the gods would make his body whole again. Instead, they took the deconstructed material of his body and rearranged it into a plant, flowering, still. Floristry basics, roots. Take cuttings in early mornings when stems, strong with water, steadied by the memory of their roots. Cut at an angle and mull the last arrangements while they drink from their new slants of severance. Most of my blooms, I know, die young. Some come in boxes, already severed, their stems in individual plastic tubes. Others I cut myself, my left hand cradling the stem that my right snips with shears sterilized. There is no need to be wistful. Flowers shed. Orchid, noun, 2a. Greek symbolism is not always good for business, but the story can be tweaked. Learn to identify the beginning that best serves you. Prune it where it doesn't. Begin, for example, with Henry Ridley and our national flower for a local flair and a tint of colonial nostalgia. 1893, 5 years into his job as the director of the Singapore Botanic Gardens, Henry discovered a new orchid hybrid. He quickly took a cutting, had it sketched preserved, and presented Vanda Miss Joaquim in the Gardener's Chronicle, the respected horticultural periodical in London. People like to tell me floristry is a good job for a lady. The guy who came in yesterday didn't even say lady. He said girl. Girl. In his eyes, dimmed by those reflective Ray-Bans, my plants and I are one and the same. Trivial, domestic, primed for a life of objectification. Yes, I said. I play with lives for a living. Orchid, noun, 3a. When Henry, nicknamed Mad Ridley for his precision and fervor, first registered the hybrid with the Royal Horticultural Society in London, he had acknowledged Miss Agnes Joaquim as its creator. In this telling, you may choose to question Henry, in which case the plot would thicken in 1963, when Humphrey Morrison Burkill, then director of the Singapore Botanic Gardens, asserted that Vanda Miss Joaquims were nothing more than a delightful accident of nature. For it would have been impossible for a local, much less a local woman, to have had the vision or skill to artificially pollinate an orchid. Certainly not before 1928, when Humphrey's predecessor, Richard Hotham, established Singapore's orchid hybridization program. Floristry basics, synonyms. Each cutting is unique, but that is not to say despair is the only rational response to wilting. Look for a synonym, if necessary, in the catalogue. There they are novel, updated daily. I can't help, no matter how many times I take everything apart, but repeat the same arrangements over and over again. It used to be so intuitive. But now I look at my cuttings scattered on the table and I don't know how to begin. Maybe I've lost it. Maybe I should have been content with floristry as a hobby. Maybe I should just quit and go back to my job. But this is not something I can just leave. There's rent, and then there are all these potted lives to care for. Each morning I check leaves for signs of thirst. In the store there is no rain, no morning dew. Occasionally the aircon drips. Mum saw the beauty in everything, in withered flowers, in millipedes, in me. I remember the day I received my first report card. I was 7. The form teacher, Miss Tan, told us to line up according to our class rankings. I was 39 out of 40. The line unfolded from the smart end by the classroom door to my end in front of the teacher's table. Miss Tan kept walking to and from her table to get the presents she got for us, but as she worked her way down the line, the rewards shrank, from a basket filled with toys and sweets to a small notebook, a pencil case, and finally to a wooden pencil, which she pushed into my hands with a dirty look. I remember thinking that if I had felt terrible, the boy next to me must have felt worse. But when I turned to see what he got, I saw that it was the same pencil. The kind I hated, which, instead of gliding across the paper, scratched. When our eyes met, I gave him the same look that Miss Tan had given me and walked back to my desk with my head held high. After school, I carried the report card home in fear. Miss Tan wanted it signed. I gave Mom the card and watched her eyes move across the page and down towards the remarks. She could have done better if she tried. The sun was setting, and the light on the report card grew increasingly blue. There's no need to cry. I know you tried, Mom said finally, to my surprise. Come on, didn't you say you wanted to learn how to report an orchid? When you take an orchid out of its pot, you must first loosen the root's hold on the moss. Late last evening, as I unraveled the braids of the shattered phalaenopsis, I saw how the ends were white and shriveled from neglect. You have to do it gently. It's like combing hair, Mom had taught me. I remember her fingers running through mine and mine through hers until the final months when all of it started to fall. After she passed, I couldn't make anything stay anymore. No matter where I placed the cutting, no matter which cuttings I chose, no matter which form I tried, nothing felt right. In the end, I couldn't even send her off with an arrangement of my own. Orchids are too fussy. Can you recommend something easier? Although orchids are really some of the most adaptable plants on Earth, they are a cosmopolitan family, capable of surviving on every continent except Antarctica. You can find them in all kinds of habitats, in the desert, on Arctic tundra, or on coral atolls, exposed to the salt of sea spray. Cultivating plants, Mom used to say, is not so much about management as it is about world building. The transformation of a place, a greenhouse, a concrete store, a humble flat, into a rainforest, shady and damp, or an alpine meadow, open and bright. Horticulture, the practice of nurturing plants for consumption or ornament, is as much a science of cultivating belonging, the building of a home. This morning, I snipped off the last blooms still hanging on Mom's phalaenopsis. The stems stand flowerless, but it will blossom again. For now, the moss is moist and new. The roots are learning to take hold. The smell of wet earth lingers in the air. My late bloomer, Mom used to call me. Orchid, noun, 1. Begin again. More than a century after her death, Agnes was finally recognized as the creator of Vanda Miss Joaquim, which has since been reclassified as Papilionantha Miss Joaquim. The push to set the record straight began in the year 2000 when historian Nadia Wright published an article in the Malayan Orchid Review providing evidence that Agnes had hybridized the orchid herself. Nadia's research, along with Agnes's contribution, was dismissed as mere speculation, an unscholarly claim that wrongly accused male experts of gender bias. In 2015, Agnes was inducted into the Singapore Women's Hall of Fame for her hybridization of Vanda Miss Joaquim. But it was only in 2016 when her great-grandniece, Linda Locke, convinced the National Heritage Board to conduct a historical review of the evidence that official sources finally amended their records. Not much is known about Agnes, except for the bare facts. She was born and bred in Singapore in the Armenian community. She won many prizes for her plants. She never married. She passed of cancer at 45. She was the first woman in the world to hybridize an orchid. After transferring the pollen of Hookeriana to Terrace, Agnes waited for the seed to germinate into a new life, which flowers still. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do a little Q&A to engage you for staying all this time. Thank you, Zining, for this reading. The first reading this evening, there was a lot of emotion that came through also because of her bereavement. So maybe let's keep this really informal and also very open. There's a nice little group here. After hearing the three voices that Zining was bringing to life, you heard a daughter who misses her mother a lot, for sure. You might have also heard a person who loves words and definitions. And there's also a florist somewhere in there, maybe. So anybody would like to ask questions or make comments, we would love to hear from you what you gain from this little session. Would anybody would like to take a go?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Tony.
Hi, Tony.
I play the piano and write some poems, but not published yet. So really respect for what you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I really like the part where you gave the voice to the florist, where there's this guy who comes and, hey girl, it's really refreshing to hear what it's like from the other side, to hear a female voice, when you talk about objectification and all the plants. I think really speaks a lot to how times have changed. I read a lot about history and women in history. Women who can vote, and I think a lot of older women say there's a lot of progress. So I just want to acknowledge that your voice here is truly a milestone, and I think it's really incredible that I can hear this florist talk on stage and say what it's like to be on the receiving end of this kind of male treatment.
Thank you, yeah. Very happy to be on the receiving end of, the many women writers and women who have come before me as well, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's very fitting that this is Red Dot August, and you also make mention of the women who are probably as much behind the nation building. Yeah. Would anybody else want to make a comment or ask any question? Yeah. Well, the other thing I noted, right, about the reading was that the words that you bloom, you link them very much with flowers. Words and flowers come together in your work. Yeah. Could you tell us a bit about how this came about? Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually quite a moment. Actually, I was so frustrated with the subject matter. I didn't know how to approach it. I mean, orchids have been written about so often. One day I just decided to look up the etymology of orchid. And I just thought about how submerged the etymology of orchid is. I'm not going to look at orchid and think testicles, right? That's not my first reaction. And so I began to think about how words themselves grow and how meanings get attached to them and how they develop in different ways. They branch off and they bloom, and then some meanings get kind of, forgotten or outdated. And so then I began to think about words themselves as living things, as plants, you know, that often when we use a word, we're really only activating the most surface or like only one part of the meaning. And so that's where it began for me. That's where this collection really began for me, when I began to think of words as flowers and about arranging words as you would arrange a bouquet of flowers, and also then arranging stories and the kinds of motivations I think that people have behind arranging stories in a certain way. For example, arranging a story of the Vanda Miss Joaquim by erasing the contributions of Agnes Joaquim. So this is where it really comes together for me.
Yeah, I think another gift that we would like to offer to this audience is notice how inspiration comes about. Yeah, how Zining, it sounded like you were stuck for a while. And then suddenly, just by checking up the root of this word, it opened up. So maybe any of you here, if you are stuck somewhere, hopefully this evening, give you a little seat, okay? The final question, because we have a half hour, we are nearing the end. Anybody wants to, okay. Why don't we take two? Yeah, go for it.
Hi. So I guess the comment I want to have is that like the piece that struck me was the piece that struck me was the one about being ranked 39 in the class, and how you compared how like the teacher and the mother both had different ways of approaching that, and it kind of reminded me of how important it is as, you know, like the impact that you have as an adult on children. Yeah, and I guess the question to follow that up is, what's the significance of like 39 and 40 both receiving a wooden pencil instead of two different things, since you did call out that he received the same thing as you?
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yourself.
I didn't really have questions.
Oh, it's not. Thank you. Oh, it's PJ. Yes.
Okay, I got struck by the by the mother and missing her daughter a bit. So I was wondering, did you make this poem before you lost your grand aunt, or after?
Yeah. So okay, I'll talk about the first question first. So why the part about like 39 out of 40 is in this book is because orchids, like we often think about orchids as these vulnerable things, and then there's another way in which orchids are used in our narratives. Like we think of them as greenhouse orchids, and the kind of conditions that they are put in. Orchids are put in order to produce as much as they can, and that felt to me like an apt kind of analogy to the Singapore education system. So this is why like the education system experience is in this book. As for the 39 and 40 receiving the same gift, this is one of the rare moments in the book where it actually was a riff on my personal experience. So I was 39 out of 40. I did receive the same gift as the 40th. But I think what's more interesting in that moment is that the speaker at that point, she's kind of feeling bad for the person who's ranked 40th. But when she saw that she was being treated the same as the person ranked 40th, she immediately decided that she had to look down on him. Right? She immediately felt like in order to feel better about herself, she needed to demean the guy who, scored, the one guy who scored worse than her. So I think this is about competition as well, and about what competition I think some of the parts about being in a competitive system that is not the healthiest. Yeah. These poems are definitely, they were written many years before, so it's before my grand aunt died, yeah. But just so happened that she passed away today, yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Zining. So can you all give her a round of applause? And yeah, if you would like to find out more about her book, it's available there. Many thanks to the Esplanade team. I think we are very happy to have concluded today. Have a wonderful evening.